Now that you know how define struct works, we're going to look at how to use the how to design data recipe and the data-driven templates recipe to design compound data definitions based on define struct. Here's a sample problem. The problem asks us to design a data definition to represent hockey players, including both their first and last names. So I'm working with the same example we used to learn about define struct, but now we're doing the full data definition. So the key thing in this example is that when I read it, it has this property that it has two or more values that naturally fit together, including both their first and last names. Both the first and last name naturally fit together into a single hockey player. That's the key information property that we're looking for to decide if we want to have a compound data definition. If we look at the design recipes page and then go to the how to design data page, and we go to our table about form of information and what kind of data definition to use, it says that when there are two or more values that naturally belong together, we want to use a compound data definition. And here it talks about a compound data definition. As we did when we learned the other data definitions, you should go review this on your own. I'll just work through it. So the first thing in a compound data definition is there's going to be a structure that we're going to use to pull the multiple values together into a single value. So we'll say define struct player, and then the list of field names, we'll call them first name and last name. So now I have a mechanism for doing it. And I'm going to say player is make player string string. Now what is this doing? So what this is doing is it's saying something is a player if it's a make player and the first field is a string and the second field is a string. And we'll interpret it this way. Make player FNLN is a hockey player with first name FN, last name LN. Or if you wanted to, you could write it this way. You could say FN is the first name, LN is the last name. You can write this interpretation a number of different ways. The key thing is you have to tell me how to interpret a piece of data of this form, so that if I happen to be reading the program and I see make player, I know that the first name is Bobby and the last name is Orr. So there's my interpretation. Here's an example. We'll stick it right here. We've already got one. Now again, examples for simple compound data definitions. You don't really need very many of them in order to be clear. One example would probably be good enough here. But starting soon, we're going to see that as data definitions become more complicated, you start to have more examples really to make it clear. So let's see, I've got the structure definition, I've got the type comment, I've got the interpretation, I've got some examples. Now I need a template. So we'll say define fun for player P. Something's going to go there. Template rules used. So now I'll go back over to the design recipes, and I'll go to the data-driven templates recipe. And if the type of data is compound, then what I'm supposed to use for the body is all the selectors. So I'm going to have dot, 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 and then all of the selectors. So jumping back over here to Racket, it means in this case I would write dot, 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 player FNP, player LNP. And the rule is, which rule was that? It's the compound data rule. And so we're going to say the compound rule, two fields. Now over here, there's another detail that says consider the result type of each selector. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go and write this like this. And I'm going to put a note here that says, well, what does player fn of p produce? Well, if this make player is actually a player, then its first field is of type string. So that will be a string. And what will ln be? Well, it will also be a string. Now let's talk about this template for just a second. What is this template saying? Well, remember, the fundamental job of a template is to tell you what do you have to work with and what's the basic structure of the function. And what this template is doing is it's saying, listen, if you write a function that consumes a player as an argument, then what it has to work with is all of the fields of the player, in this case fn and ln. So basically, the fundamental shape of the function is take the player apart into its constituent field values and do something with them. Dot, 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 as usual, means do something. Here's the first name. Here's the last name.